one of the first challenges that I see is the fear of humiliation or rejection, right? Basically, somebody says you don't know what you're doing, and especially if you are sort of trying to create a whole new product, which is something that people have not seen before, or a solution that people have not tried to apply in a particular situation, and there is an established market out there where people are used to doing something in a certain way. This fear is actually real. It's actually very real, right? Where you are trying to sort of position something to an end customer or a partner or your own sales channel, and uh, people may say, "Oh, you don't know anything, right? This is not how it is done. This is how it is done. This is how it has been done for 20 years, and we know what is to be done." And this is something that sort of comes from the origin of this. Really, is that that communication has to be perfect, and sometimes people think you are uninformed, or people think that your product will fail, or you yourself have a fear that you'll put your product and it will fail, and you will have to face humiliation. So this is one of the biggest fear that I myself perceive. Even after having done product management for such a long time, this is a fear that you must have realized. I kind of put it up as a first line in my challenges. So this is a very real thing that you will have to overcome every day. And as I said, especially if you are doing something very innovative, what people have not done before, then this is something that is key. Now, the way to actually overcome this kind of a situation is basically you have to ask whatever is in your mind. Okay, do not think that people, just because you are asking something, people will think that you are dumb or whatever, right? So one of my profs had actually told me, and this is like way back, right? I'm talking about mid 80s, and at that time, I was hesitating to ask a question. He told me questions are never dumb, right? And only answers can be dumb. Questions are never dumb. So always ask questions. If you ask a question, it means that you are unaware of something and you're trying to be aware. It doesn't mean that you are an idiot. Okay. So always ask questions. Don't have this fear of asking any questions. And I have somebody who works for me, and I really envy him because he can go into, because he's one of our hardware experts, understands RF very well, understands all the radio components very well. But when he's in front of even some people like chip makers or anybody, and sometimes even he knows better than those guys, he will still ask such rudimentary questions where you sometimes feel, oh my God, this guy doesn't even know any of the Maxwell equations. But that is how he actually brings clarity. So you have to relentlessly seek clarity and find out why people, why you feel that you will be humiliated, why will it happen. And you should always remember that perspectives differ, opinions differ, right? And as long as you are trying to solve the problem, right, you have to sort of be aware of this, and and communication is the key. Just be very clear in what you are talking about. Ask questions. If somebody says this will never work, so dig deeper and say, why will this not work? What is it that think you? And sometimes you might really find that your thinking is lacking in certain areas where other people know better, and it never harms to learn, right? So this is one of the biggest challenges that I personally face whenever I'm doing product management. The next thing that a lot of people have, and this is not just product managers, I see this fear in CEOs, I see this fear in investors, I see this fear in engineers, I see this fear in sales guys everywhere. But when you look at the fear of failure from a product manager's perspective, right? We see one of the biggest challenges that product managers is that we are actually working in a very ambiguous environment, right? You are putting in a roadmap that's like, let's say 1.5, 2 years long, right? And you don't know how the market will react. You don't know what changes will come to the market. Think something like the corona pandemic, right? That has put so many people's plans completely, in a sort of a hurricane, right? They don't know exactly what's going to happen. So these things happen, right? You don't know how your competition will react. You don't know if your positioning will work with the customers. Will they be able to see what the way you want your product to be seen? You don't know, if somebody will undercut you in the market. You are actually have way too much ambiguity in taking these decisions. And at the same time, a decision that you take can make or break the product. So, you have a sense of responsibility on your shoulders. And this is something that actually, sort of instills this fear on people. And if you see the sort of image on the right hand side, right, this is something that I always kind of keep myself sort of abreast of, and I keep reminding myself. One is that if you are afraid to fail, you will never taste success. Now that is I don't know how much more clearly I can say it, but this is something that's like a thing that I've learned over a huge period of time working in this industry. Is that if you are afraid to fail, you will never taste success. Number one. Number two is that remember, your failures do not define who you are. Right? If you fail, it means your venture has failed. It means your initiative has failed. You are not failing as a person. And I know it's very hard to delink it because you're so passionate about your product and your company. But this is something that you have to keep in mind, that the failure that you have does not define who you are. Okay? And basically, two things that really help you to sort of get out of this situation is that flexibility is key, right? You should be, again, this again goes to some of the fear of humiliation a little bit, where you should be willing to change your opinion if a new fact is presented to you, right? So you have said that this is how I'm going to position my product. Here's my roadmap. Here is how I'll take it to market. But if somebody comes up and gives you some facts which are contrary to what you had thought, you should be willing to accept it and change your positioning, your roadmap, your product, your sort of your outlook towards it. So flexibility within yourself is really key to avoiding this fear, right? And once again, and you will see this come up so many times, that communication. You have to communicate. This is one of the very key, fundamentally sort of strong aspects of any product manager. And you have to get executives to buy into your decisions, right? If you're saying that we are going to price it like this. Right now, you guys are groups and you are sort of peers. But even when you are reporting into, let's say, the VP of marketing, or if you are reporting into the CEO himself, you have to make sure that if you take a decision on your positioning, if you take a decision on pricing, if you take a decision on the roadmap, you get the buy-in of the executive. That way, it becomes a collective decision rather than your own. And here, the only way you can actually make it happen is that you kind of communicate this very clearly, right? So as I said, feel free to ask questions. If it's getting too much from a philosophical perspective, please let me know. I will to tone it down accordingly. But I thought it was good to kind of give my experiences and what I face on a day-to-day basis, so that you guys are well prepared as you go into the marketplace. The next thing to sort of remember is the allergy to ambiguity. Now, this is something as engineers, right? We have been taught to be logical. We have been taught to be, very systematic. We have been taught that 1 + 1 is always 2 and 2 + 2 is always 4. But sometimes, I kind of say you have to think like a physicist rather than an engineer if you're a product this thing. Because if you ask a physicist what is 2 + 2, he'll probably tell you 2 + 2 can be 5 for very large values of 2. So, you have to be able to live within the ambiguity and all of the unknowns that you are faced with. And you should be able to take decision with incomplete or inaccurate information. You can take a decision now and be willing to change that decision later on. So what we talked about last time about flexibility and adaptability, that is something that is key to be able to manage your allergy to ambiguity. And everybody has this thing, right? If you go out shopping and if like something is available for 100 rupees, you think, oh, is this available for 80 rupees somewhere else? But you take a call and you say, okay, I'm going to buy this, right? You obviously can't go into every shop and do the price comparison like that, right? So you have to sort of live with this, with this ambiguity, and you can't be allergic to ambiguity. And I know that all of you have been trained to be engineers, and engineers are usually trained to be very systematic and very logical. But as a product manager, you have to kind of, let go of your allergy to ambiguity. The next thing, which I briefly touched upon earlier, is that you should never be rigid, right, of your opinion. So basically, if you say that this is what I think is going to happen, or this is what I think the market wants, don't be rigid. As you see in that image on the right hand side, right, it says try to be informed instead of just opinionated, right? You can't be opinionated. You have to be informed. You have to, be sort of, flexible in terms of changing your opinion about your product. Sometimes you kind of also feel, you will also come across situations, and I have come across a situation in my life where your entire product becomes irrelevant because of some market changes. And if you kind of be rigid in your opinion, you cannot move very quickly there. So here I've sort of listed down, two interesting quotes that I've heard. One thing that I heard is that, your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. This is something that somebody told me during a presentation, right? Where, this was a large company doing certain things in certain ways. And I said, in my opinion, you should not do it like this. And this guy said, yeah, this is interesting, but it's completely irrelevant because, that's your opinion and we have some other opinion, and, we are asking for a solution and you have to give us that solution. So that was an interesting quote that I heard, so I put it down here. The other is that, this is something that you have to understand as you become entrepreneurs later on, is that, within your own organization, within your own building, within your own sort of circle, you will have a lot of support on how to grow the product or how to make the product better or what to build into the product. There is engineering who will have great ideas. There will be R&D, the CTO's office, the executives who want to drive the product in a certain way. And as a product manager, you have to remember that while all of that input is very, very good, the answers that you are seeking are not in your building. You have to go out into the market. You have to talk to prospective clients. You have to talk to, customers. You have to talk to your channel. And that is where the feedback will come to you as to what is the solution that the market is seeking. So, these are two interesting quotes that I have sort of heard in my life. So I thought it's relevant to put it here. And then, if you are too opinionated, if you have a very strong opinion about something, it actually stops you from stopping and listening to somebody who has a counter opinion. So again, remember, opinion is not a fact, right? Opinion is what you think about a fact. So while the fact remains the same, the opinion that two people have about that fact could be very, very different. So you have to be open to listening to, others' opinion. And if you hold your opinion too strongly, it will hinder you from doing that, right? And as I've written here, customers change, markets change, requirements change, and we have to keep an open mind. And when you are talking to your market, when you're talking to end customers, when you're talking to prospective customers, as a product manager, your job is to try and learn. Your job is to figure out what they need, what their pain points are, what are the problems that they have which you want to try and solve. Do not try to teach them something. So I kind of always do that, right? Whenever we kind of go out, I would let an engineer do the demo, right? Because the engineer is sort of very passionate about what he's built. And when it comes to giving a demo, I think an engineer should actually represent what you have to do, what you have to present, right? He can teach people about the techniques that you're using, about how great your product is, blah, blah, blah. But it's your job to sit on the side and listen to what people have to say. They will come up with some counter arguments. They will ask some questions which you have not thought about before, etc. But that is what the product manager's sort of job is. And the last thing that I put in here is something that is a natural thing to happen if you are with the product for 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes even 10 years. And the product becomes your child, right? If anybody actually gives a negative review, or if somebody criticizes some function of the product, or somebody sort of says, oh, this is not useful in this place, etc., you kind of take it to heart. You feel that you are personally attacked. But we have to remember that the product is not your child, right? You have to let go. You have to sort of take a look at it from a very objective manner. And if your opinions are too rigid, it will actually really stop you from doing that. Now, here you will see on this slide, there is a lot of text, and this is something that I've been guilty of for a lot of times, that is procrastination, right? You kind of say, okay, मैं कल कर दूंगा यार, मतलब today was a big day, it was a long time, I had such 2 demos to give, I had to attend these 2 meetings up, I'm tired, let me do this tomorrow, right? And this is something that is so, it's like a sin if you're a product manager, right? Because one of the key things that you have to kind of remember is that once you have a product, it's in the market, it's selling, it's, people are sort of, getting to kind of like your idea, like your solution. And if you don't do your job, right, some other department will actually fill that void. Somebody will come and say, oh, this customer asked for this feature, let me add it like this, right? So if you see, I put down like these 4 points here, right, is that if you don't provide clear requirements and direction, right, engineers will go and develop whatever they please. If you don't provide clear direction about the target customer, sales will go and sell it wherever they feel it's right to sell it, right? And if you don't establish the pricing, sales will make up the pricing. They will just, make up some pricing because, they just need to sell this product. And then if you don't provide clear direction about the target customers, right messaging, then your Marcom team will go wherever they please, say whatever they want, and that will drag your product to in a completely different direction. So as a product manager, if you do not take these things, seriously and take timely actions around these things, you will see that your product will get dragged into multiple directions where you did not want it to go. The fact is that the product manager should be the final authority on what goes into the product, right? I'm sure that there'll be a very strong personalities in R&D, in CTO, in engineering, in sales. But if you give in, then you will probably drag the product into a direction that you did not want, right? So this is something that you have to kind of remember very, very clearly, is that, do not procrastinate, because if you do that, then your product will get dragged into directions that you do not want, because the product is not going to stop for you. The market is not going to stop for you. Sales is not going to stop for you. You have to make sure that you have control of this. The other sort of challenge that I think people face is that the inability to communicate fearlessly, and I use the word fearlessly here, is a very, very kind of key here, because a lot of people communicate, but there are fears that keep stopping them. And as we saw in the first 2 challenges that we talked about, right, communication is the key, right? Because what will happen is that if you have a strong team, and obviously you will have opinions that differ, and people will challenge, right, you in what you have thought through for the product in terms of vision, the mission, and things like that. And especially if you have a strong engineering team, they will give you estimates. And, when you are unconvinced, you have to be able to challenge, right? If the CEO comes and says, oh, now we have got a great, opportunity where we can give service, and if you think that is going to take away like 10 engineers from your team and slow down your product, you have to be very, very fearless in terms of challenging that decision and trying to figure out why you are going to direction that you don't want to go. So basically, people will challenge you. You have to be ready to sort of, defend your position. At the same time, you have to be able to fearlessly challenge the decisions or opinions that others have. So that you kind of do the right thing for the product. So this is something that's actually we have seen that this happens very often when there is a very strong team, right? Everybody is great in what they do, like the head of engineering, the CTO, the CEO, the sales head. All of these are very, very strong personalities, and you as a product manager, you will be faced with this, and you have to be able to rise above this thing, because remember that you have to challenge things, right? And here there are actually two things that actually come into the picture, right? So basically, uh, there is a what is called as, that you have to be convinced that others' motives are actually aligned, right? Because if there is a problem in the motives of people, then you have to kind of introspect as to are you in the right team or not. But once you are convinced about your motives, right? What is your motive, right? Your motives has to be that are you motivated for your company's and product success, or is your motive a personal goal? And personal goals can come in not because you have malicious thought, but just because you are so attached to your product, you are so attached to your idea, you are so opinionated that you want your opinion to kind of survive. So you have to be convinced about your motives. You have to be direct and you have to be respectful. Don't beat around the bush, because if you drop hints, remember, people will never pick up hints, right? You will see this with your friends. I see this even with my wife. I drop a hint, she never gets it. You have to be direct. You have to say, this is what I want. And unless you're direct, this is not going to be work. But at the same time, you have to be respectful. You have to say that, this is what is the best for the product, and what you are saying is wrong, or this is why I think are the policies in your opinion. You have to be very direct, but be respectful, because others are also, because remember, you have already established that their motives are the same as yours. And then, as I said earlier also, right, be ready to be proven wrong, right? If somebody proves you wrong, be ready for it and change your opinion. So Kiran, you have asked about what are sales blockers that I've mentioned, to kind of challenge when you are unconvinced. Now, see, these sales blockers are things like, people go and say, oh, I cannot make this sale unless you give me this feature. This is one of the biggest things that I've seen as people coming out with the sales blockers saying, you know what, I can get this $1 million deal only if we had Bluetooth in our product, we could have done this. But because we don't have Bluetooth in our product, I can't make a sale, because you might have 20 different features, but people come and say that, ye ek feature nahi hai na, so this customer is not going to buy it. Now, you have to challenge that, right? You have to figure out, is that a real need for that customer? Is it something that's an optional thing? Is there a different way that you can solve that problem? So sales will come back to you with blockers, right? And as I told you, this is one of the biggest blockers that I have heard, saying that ye ek feature hota na, to ye sale ho gaya hota. And you have to really introspect at that time, and you have to challenge the sales guy, the sales engineer who was with that guy when they met the end customer, or even sometimes have a meeting with the customer, himself or herself, and try and understand what that need is. So these are the kind of sales blockers that sales will throw at you, and you have to be able to challenge this when you are unconvinced about it.
Yeah, no, it does bring out a very important point, and I agree with you. One of the things which I feel that especially for the product manager or the CEO or head of sales, if you say that I cannot sell unless these features are there, more often than not, it is not true. There are bigger or larger drivers because of which customer will either buy or will not buy. So, so it is important to understand that these sales blockers are not always true. Number one. Number two, Jatin, I feel that startups will never have complete product. So you're always in a situation where you're trying to sell or get the customers to buy from you. I think it's more founders especially have to make customers buy rather than you selling in the early stages, in which case, again, in our own mind, if you feel that unless these features are existing, I can't sell, that becomes a sales blocker, very, very important. Having said that, Jatin, you yourself have seen that there are times when these warnings or red flags or orange flags are true, where the product manager need to take that input and reshape the product roadmap, because sometimes these are genuine and these are very individual decisions by the product manager picking these inputs also.
Yeah, absolutely, Kiran. So all I've said is that, you have to challenge when you're unconvinced. I'm not saying that you should not change your opinion, because as I also said that you have to be ready to be proven wrong, right? So yeah, but unless you challenge it, right, you will then get dragged into directions that you don't want to.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you are unconvinced, you have to challenge it. If you are convinced, then you have to, uh, obviously change what you're doing. So, and the other thing is that, Kiran, one of the things that I want to introduce here, right? It's a different, maybe it's a topic on its own, but there is something called the MVP, and everybody who is defining a product should know what an MVP is. MVP stands for minimal viable product. It means that if you're trying to solve a problem, there are these three things that you have to consider. If you do not consider those things, then your product is not viable at all. So when you sit down and you create your roadmap, right, you have to actually think about what the MVP is, without which your product is not viable. And for that, obviously, you have to talk to the customers, prospect, even people who are using a competitive product, to understand what that minimal viable product is. And if like somebody is telling you that a part of your minimal viable product has to be there, then that is obviously not a sales blocker. But you will come across the sales blockers as you go along, and you have to be, if you're unconvinced, you should challenge it. And that is where the fearless communication comes into the picture. Because sometimes what happens is that somebody who is head of sales is going to be a very vocal person, very extrovert. He's going to be a forceful person, because you cannot succeed in sales unless you have those qualities. And if you're sitting in a room as a product manager, if you're not fearless in terms of communicating, if you are fearful and you kind of accept what people say, then you're not doing you're doing a disservice to your product.
Jatin, this is a very important point you're bringing. And these things test you every day as a product manager, or even as a founder or a CEO, even head of sales, that you don't have all features. And minimum viable product, Jatin, I also have a derivative called minimum value product, which is given that value, the customer will accept it and work with you and take your product roadmap कि भाई तुम्हारे पास ये 3 चीजें नहीं है, and I know some of this is not on your roadmap, but can you put it? That's a good discussion. And as you know, Jatin, that when we went to Jio, we had an entire series of features that are needed in a telecom environment that we did not have in our Wi-Fi product. But we had a minimum value proposition which they accepted, and then we built all those linkages to different things, all the feeders and everything, and a lot of work that came out where the product increased its functionality to be a carrier worthy product, but we did not have all of that in the beginning, if you recall, but we still were able to get it across in a very live and large environment of a customer.
This is a very interesting one, right? And this is something that I see it every time. I see it with so many product managers. I see it almost everywhere. And not only product management, but the entire sort of founding team is sometimes very, very guilty of this, right? And this challenge is actually attachment, right? See, you have a product, you have an idea, you have a solution, and remember that these things have a life cycle. And these things will decline and they will die. So, and there can be multiple reasons why this can happen, right? One of the best ways to go is, having lived your life pretty well, which I call, it's a completed life cycle, right? So, for example, I'll tell you, right? Core banking, I don't know how many of you guys sort of remember that in the late 90s, India had this whole revolution of core banking, right? Where every bank in India was trying to buy core banking. They were integrating their branches to the head office. They were giving a single window interface to all of their customers, etc. Before that, loan window was different, and teller window was different, and cash window was different, and you had to go to this person for this work, that person to that work, and India sort of took it, and they kind of took this core banking and they took it to the hilt, and every bank was doing that. Now you look at it after 30 years, right? you will see that core banking is dying a natural death, and everybody else is moving towards a more, for a lack of a better term, I'll use a term called edge banking, where you are relying upon your phones, your sort of all your gadgets to actually provide that experience to the user, rather than user having to kind of come into your branch and then interact with your people. So core banking is taking a hit. This is taking a this. So, for example, if you are a part of core banking, its life cycle is complete. It had its place and time, and now things has evolved, market has evolved, people have evolved, the way of doing things have changed. So, yeah. So if you had a product that was sort of doing core banking, you have to let it go. Nobody's going to buy that anymore. Right? So, it's kind of lived its useful life cycle. The other thing is that if your product or idea was ill-conceived to start with, and at that time when you started it, you didn't feel it was ill-conceived, and over a period of time, you come to believe that yes, my idea was not that great, and you have to do something else. You should be able to let go of your product and your idea, right? If the market is not conducive to what you've thought, and I've seen this so many times in my life, I can sort of rattle off multiple examples of this, is that sometimes ideas are ahead of the market, okay, and sometimes you just don't have the infrastructure to follow through with that idea, or the market is not ready, or maybe you are late to the market when the market is just not conducive for your product or your market. Maybe your cost of running the service is too high. Maybe you cannot manufacture as many devices as you need to make it really successful. So if that is the case, then you have to at some level let go of your product and your idea. The third thing is inability to execute, and this comes from many places, right? This could happen because you did not have funds. It could happen because you did not find the investor at the right time. It could happen because your engineering did not step up. It could happen because the engineering solution that you had is really expensive when it comes to production. It might work at a POC and a sort of a prototype stage, but as you go into engineering, you find that it's just not viable in terms of cost, or it is just getting too expensive, or there's engineering infeasibility. This will happen, and if these things happen, you have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to accept it. And if you keep an attachment, if you think that this is your child, then this is going to become difficult to sort of overcome. And one thing that you should really understand is that if you fail late, it is very expensive. So you should fail fast. And I think this has been used by so many different people in so many different ways. Even large companies have this. That says, fail fast, break early, right? This is something like Facebook had also adopted at one point in time where it was really growing. That they used to roll out features that would break, that would fail, but they were saying that's fine. Just roll out the features so that we keep ahead of the market. But the fact is that if you are going to fail, you would rather fail early than you fail late, because failing late can also be fatal at points in time. An excellent idea or technology does not always result in a successful product. This is what we should understand. That your idea may have been the best idea since sliced bread, or your technology may have been the biggest technology that ever existed, etc. It doesn't always result in a successful product, right? And there are examples of this, right? There are examples of this. So at that time you have to let go. You can pick it up again after a few years when the market matures or whatever, right? So I'll give you a very sort of big example. Even you probably already know this, right? So whatever we call today, right, as machine learning or deep machine learning, these are all neural networks, and neural networks have existed since what, 60s, early 60s, Kiran, right?
Yeah. From the time the AI was invented, this branch existed. Yeah.
Right. So in fact, this concept was available in early 60s, right? About neural networks. But that time, there were a lot of things why it did not become successful, right? The amount of computing power that is required is very high. The amount of data that you need to create a good model by passing it through the neural net, that amount of data is, unless it is a huge amount of data, right, that is not going to succeed. You're not going to get a good model. which meant that you needed huge storage, you needed to a way to pass the storage across, you needed a strong network, and all of them did not exist in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Only now this idea has really taken sort of footing because of the growth in the amount of data people have. Big data was the sort of impetus for the revival of this neural networks, is now people call machine learning, right? So this thing existed. It was too early when it came out in the 60s, but it stayed around, and now that market is conducive. This is like taking off right now. So excellent ideas do not always result in a viable product or a successful product. So you need to kind of remember that, and that's very that's one of the key things that you want to sort of remember. So attachment is another one of the sins that I would say. Like you say, procrastination is a sin as far as product management is concerned. Attachment is another sin, as I call it, when it comes to product management. And this is something that is so important. I cannot underestimate understate how important this is. Is that the challenge sometimes is in the inability to prioritize, right? You don't know what you should do first, what you should do next, because a lot of times multiple things will be important, right? And you have to be able to figure out what you are going to do first, right? And here comes the fearless communication, that you have to be able to say no to something, saying no, we will not do it now because this is a bigger priority. We'll do this and we will do that. So that is something that we have to do. And here also I want to put in some interesting quotes I've heard, right? So first thing that I have heard, an interesting quote, and I'd like to say this is my quote, where I always tell people is that the product management is not here to it's here to help the entire sales channels. Everybody in sales, not individual salespeople. So if somebody comes and says, this is the feature that I want, if you give me this feature, I'll make my sales number. I'm not here to help you as an individual. I'm here to actually help my entire sales channel, which means that I will take this input that this feature is required in the product from many different people. And then I will prioritize which comes first, which comes next. So I'm here to help the entire sales channels, not individual salespeople, right? And you also have to remember this one thing, that when you talk to end customers, they will give you solutions. That is, I want it to be solved in this way. That's what they're telling you. You have to unearth the problem that the end customer has, right? Because end customer always say, oh, if you do this thing and that thing and you do this, I will buy. But underneath that is a problem. What he or she is trying to communicate to you is that this is the solution that I need. But you have to think about the problem and come up with a solution of that problem on your own. Because unless you do that, you are actually creating a solution that is very particular to one customer, which may or may not be useful for other customers in your scope. Okay. The other thing that will actually drive your inability to prioritize is actually winning the next big deal, right? You are actually looking at the next deal, which is like, somebody is willing to pay you $1 million for something, and you have to prioritize. And at that time, even if it is going a little bit away from your product vision, you have to have this clarity of thought saying, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? You have to be able to communicate this. You have to be able to convince other people in your team that that is the right decision to take. But winning the next big deal will actually bring in situations where you will not have the ability to prioritize, and you have to be able to work through that. The other thing is that, going after an adjacent market, and as we have talked about in earlier sessions as well, if you are too broad-based, then you will have so many different requirements from so many different markets, it will become impossible to prioritize. So you should go after an adjacent market only when you have captured your current market. And if you kind of do that, that you have decided to go after an adjacent market, then you have to understand that there will be prioritization clashes, and you have to be willing to, address those. And we are people, right? We have relationships. We kind of talk to people. We kind of empathize with them. We understand their situation, and then just to be nice to that person, you kind of say, okay, ठीक है, ये feature दे दूंगा तुमको. मतलब that is something that as human beings we will always be faced with, where you want to help somebody, you want to be nice to somebody, and that will also contribute to your inability to prioritize, and that's a challenge that you have to face as you go on, right? And as I said, saying no and the fearless communication slide that we talked about, that is a key to kind of, making sure that you get a handle on this. Right? And then you have to define early on what's an RFE. RFE is actually stands for request for announcement. And there are other people who will give it some other acronym as well, so you don't have to go with this. But when requests for announcements or new features come to you, there has to be a process, there has to be a well-defined criteria for reprioritization, and you have to make sure that you define this early on so that when newer salespeople join your organization, you can very clearly define to them as to, if you want a feature, fill up this form. You have to tell me what is the target market for this. You have to tell me what is the kind of, revenue target that you have towards this feature. What is it that this feature will enable? You have to gather all this data, and then, have a criteria for reprioritization. And that is something that you must do to be able to sort of, overcome this inability to prioritize this challenge. So, that this is my last challenge that I wanted to speak about. So, just wanted to sort of, give you guys this sort of background on the challenges that I myself face on a day-to-day basis while I'm doing product management. And I thought this will be a sort of important insight for you guys as you go out into the market and, face the market. So with that, I guess I'm done. Kiran, you have a question, right?
Jatin, I just wanted to make an observation that if you have desire for, let's say, 15 different features or capabilities or in a product, and you have only 9 of them, and you sort of jump for 12 or 13, but you're not able to test all of them, and then the product gets into the hands of customers, and then they see the crack on how it doesn't work because you've not been able to test. That has a negative impact. But if you deliver only 6 and the 6 works very, very well, I think that is, to me, more important.
Yes.
And in fact, just to share with you, I'm having a mentoring session with a entrepreneur, and he's been around for 5 years and reached about 1.5 crore revenue and not getting beyond that. And last about a year and a half, added a bunch of things which have not worked well, and it has stalled the customer base. And so sometimes we don't realize we try to accommodate everything without properly testing, especially for software-based products. And software there in every product today. Even if you're making a shirt, there is something in your system that has software in it. So if these things are not done well, it has more negative impact, because customers do not like things that are not easy to work with. If they are crooked, if they are not easy to work with, they are not flawless, then the experience is not good. And I think we have talked about that next decade or two at least, or whatever time, most analysts, visionaries are putting big ticket on this thing on experience of customers rather than feature or how many things I have. So, and you recall, Jatin, that you remember way back in 2000, I think 4 or so, our upgrade manager did not work in McDonald Corporation's global, headquarters. Remember?
Right.
And we had some bricks on hand. Some of our sensors were bricks. And we, I think you and Samir, write that piece and never to look back at that piece of code again. And we never had any upgrade issues thereafter in 16, 17, 18 years. So some of those calls are very important to make sure that we don't have crappy stuff going into the customer. Even if it has less features but works well, that's better situation than you have, sort of bit of everything, but it doesn't work well.